You are just one great big ball of emotions. Little voices in your head that tell you should feel one way, you should feel another way, you should do this thing, you shouldn't do that thing, etc. But what if all of those voices coerced you in just one direction, and that direction was nowhere? Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel. The poem in question today is known as The Listeners by Walter de la Mare, and it reads as such. "Is there anybody there?" said the traveler, knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in the silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor, and the bird flew up out of the turret above the traveler's head, and he smote upon the door again a second time. "Is there anybody there?" he said. But no one descended to the traveler. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his gray eyes, where he stood perplexed and still, but only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging on the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveler's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry, while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf neath the starred and leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door even louder and lifted his head. "Tell them I came, and no one answered, that I kept my word," he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through their shadowiness, the shadowiness of their house, of their still house, from the one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup, and the sound of an iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backwards when the plunging hoofs were gone. Okay, so there's plenty of questions that we could ask here. Who is the speaker? Who are the phantoms? Are the phantoms really phantoms? How does the speaker know that there is someone listening to him? Why does he not care that they're not answering? What is the promise that he made? But I want to focus on something different than those questions. If we are to accept that poetry is metaphor, if we are to accept that there is something at play here besides just a ghost story, what would it be here? A guy rides his horse out to a nearly abandoned house and doesn't get an answer, and maybe there's ghosts in the house, maybe there's not. What are we to take from this? Well, one of my favorite things to talk about on the channel, and you know this if you've been here for any extended period of time, I talk about this any opportunity I get, and that's the split brain. The split brain experiments. Now, I asked, and I know this is a big sin going to ChatGPT for things, but I wanted an explanation of um, one of the experiments that they did on people in general, just because I always trip up my words when I do this one. So here's the experiment. Left field visual is the right field hemisphere. This eye, this brain. This eye, right field visual, left hemisphere. So if I do this, I'm actually triggering this side of my brain. So okay, maybe I should take a step back. Seizures, I don't know if it's all seizures or some seizures, are caused by electrical activity in the corpus callosum. So you've got the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. The corpus callosum holds those together. If there is excessive electric activity in the middle of the brain, that causes a seizure. Well, they put those things together in the medical field, but they didn't know what to do about it. And one day, somebody decided, I'm just going to cut them apart. I'm going to sever the corpus callosum. Just right down the middle of the brain. Voila, no electric activity. It'll be fine. Well, it did stop seizures. But then people started noticing some weird stuff about individuals who had had their brain sawed in half. And it turns out some of that weirdness is that, guys, you have competing voices in your mind at all times. One of them just kind of normally takes a back seat. So, what do I mean by this? One of the experiments that they did was the experimenter would close one of the eyes of the individual. The experimenter would flash the word walk to the right hemisphere only, which means covering your right eye, this eye sees the word walk. The left hemisphere, which controls speech, so this eye does not see that word. This eye is covered and is shown the word walk. Well, this eye can read walk. The patient is told to follow whatever it is that the card says. So you cover up the right eye, you show the patient the word walk. Patient says, I got to get up and walk. Patient gets up and walks. This is where it gets weird. The researcher asks them at that moment, why are you leaving the room? Remember, this is covered up. Why are you leaving the room? Well, the left hemisphere did not see the word walk. The right hemisphere did. The left hemisphere is the side of the word that controls speech. So when you ask that person why they're walking, this hemisphere that controls speech does not know. And every time that hemisphere, the hemisphere that controls speech but did not see the word, makes up a reason. So the individual and the speech center of the brain knew that the brain was being locomotionized. The brain knew the body was walking out of the room. The brain did not know why it was, because that half of the brain did not see the word walk, would lie. That individual would make up a reason and tell the doctor, I'm leaving to go get a pop. It would lie. How wild is that? But what it proves is there's two people in you at all times. All the time. That you are walking around, doing things, talking to people. You're not a person. You're at least two. And I say at least. Why do I say at least? Well, that experiment is able to separate one person in your brain from another person in your brain. But what if we just don't have the experiments to separate others? Have you ever heard of IFSM, the Internal Family Systems Model, or I guess IFS? It is an integrative approach to individual psychotherapy developed by Richard C. Schwartz, and this is from Wikipedia, but we're getting somewhere, I promise. In the 1980s, it combines systems thinking with the view that the mind is made up of relatively discrete sub personalities, each with its own unique viewpoint and qualities. IFS uses systems psychology, particularly as developed for family therapy, to understand how these collections of subpersonalities are organized. Now, I'm not saying that I completely believe this theory, but it's interesting to talk about, and we're going to work in this poem in a moment. IFS posits that the mind is made up of multiple parts, and underlying them is a person's core or true self. Like members of a family, a person's inner parts can take on extreme roles or subpersonalities. Each part has its own perspective, interests, memories, and viewpoint. A core tenet of IFS is that every part of a positive intent has a positive intent, even if its actions are counterproductive or cause dysfunction. There is no need to fight with, coerce, or eliminate parts. The IFS method promotes internal connection and harmony to bring the mind back into balance. So there's some general types of parts explained here. Exiles represent psychological trauma, often from childhood, and they carry the pain and fear. Exiles may become isolated from the other parts and polarize the system. Managers and firefighters try to protect a person's consciousness by preventing the exile's pain from coming to awareness. Managers take on a preemptive protective role. They influence the way a person interacts with the external world, protecting the person from harm and preventing painful or traumatic experiences from flooding the person's conscious awareness. Firefighters emerge when exiles break out and demand attention. They work to divert attention away from the exile's hurt and shame, which leads to impulsive and or inappropriate behaviors like overeating, drug use, and or violence. They can also distract a person from pain by excessively focusing attention on more subtle activities such as overworking or overmedicating. Well, that's all neat. Why am I talking about this in correlation with this poem? If we're accepting a poem as a metaphor, what we have here is an individual going to a house and knocking on the door, and all of the inhabitants, maybe dead people, ignoring that person. Well, what if the traveler is a symbol for the world? What if the horse is a symbol for, I don't know, work, commerce, travel? Then we have both of those things. The world, the outside world, humanity, plus work, plus commerce, plus travel, all coming to a house which might represent an individual. Neatly enough, in this IFS example, we're talking about a family, but a house can represent a person very easily, right? We understand that representation. All the stuff you have is in your house. What if that represents you? All the stuff that you know is represented in some way in that house. That's a very easy line to draw. So what about those ghosts? What if those ghosts are all the firefighters here, or all the exiles? What if there's no managers? Everything inside you is looking at the world, at the rest of humanity coming to your door and knocking. And everything inside your head, all the people in there, all the firefighters, all the exiles in there, say no. Say no, leave me alone. There are no managers to rile you up, set you straight. It's just all the problems. All the problems wandering around, creeping about, and wanting not to face the world. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.